Hello and welcome to Canvas, the Niger-Delta Roundtable, where I discuss the future of this region blessed with hydrocarbon resources. Every week, we give time to reflect on topics relevant to the development of the Niger-Delta and her people. This edition of the podcast is no different. I'm here once again to focus on how to take the region to a more promising future. Program is sponsored by the operator of the NNPC SPDC Total Energies Achieve Joint Venture, the Shell Petroleum Development Company of Nigeria Limited, headquartered here in Port Harcourt. Thank you for joining. I'm Adedayo Lushakin. For this episode, our topic is getting into the comedy industry. In this episode, we'll be exploring the ins and outs of getting into the comedy industry, from open mics and writing your first jokes to navigating the business side of comedy. We'll cover it all. We'll also hear from a seasoned comedian who will share his personal journey, tips, and advice for anyone looking to break into the scene. Comedy is an art form that transcends boundaries and brings people together. It's a powerful tool for social commentary, a way to cope with life challenges, and most importantly, a source of joy and laughter. But breaking into the comedy industry can be daunting. Where do you start? How do you find your unique voice? What are the common pitfalls to avoid? We'll discuss all these questions and more, providing you with a roadmap to kickstart your comedy career. Now, whether you're interested in stand-up, improv, sketch comedy, or writing for television, there's something here for everyone. We'll also touch on the importance of networking, building a fan base, and staying resilient in the face of rejection. Again, the topic for this episode of Canvas is getting into the comedy industry. My guest is Daniel Nnwoka, aka Dan the Humorous, or Danny, as I like to call him. Daniel Nnwoka is a stand-up comedian. He's a political satirist on Nigeria's first ever news and political satire, The Other News, on Channels Television. He is an actor on Mnet's My Flatmates. He's also an on-air personality with the radio comedy group Funky 4 Plus 1 and a crew of It's Okay with Okay on Lagos Talks 91.3 FM. It gives me great pleasure to welcome to this episode of Canvas on Air, Daniel Nnwoka, aka many of you know him as Dan D Humorous. Daniel, great to have you here today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Big pleasure.
I've been working on this for quite some time. Been thinking this, planning this. That it'd be nice to have you on the podcast to share your experience to inspire a younger generation here in Port Harcourt in Rivers State, in the Niger Delta, and by extension Nigeria, who are thinking someday I would love to stand on a big stage, make tons of people laugh, maybe make some decent money off that as well. And it's great to have you here finally today.
Thank you so much. Big honor.
Let's get right to it then.
Yeah.
Starting with maybe the most obvious question that I would ask.
Mm.
Uh, what is comedy,
Mm.
really?
Well, I would say comedy is an art form. Comedy is a form of entertainment that is meant to elicit humor. That's meant to bring out laughter, from the recipients of that art form. So it could be a joke told, it could be a movie acted, a theater script being done on stage. It could even be a drawing, a cartoon, anything. Whatever it is that has a level of artistry, being put in to get out laughter from the consumers. I think to me, I'll call that comedy.
So, if I were to say, would I be right if I said that comedy is first and last strictly to elicit laughter, to make people laugh,
Yep.
and once it starts making people think a little bit, it's no longer comedy?
Oh no, it is comedy because those are now the offshoots. Those are now the in chemistry you call them the isotopes. They are the extra things that come out but essentially is to make you laugh first of all. Now don't forget there's a very operative word there, the art in it. So that sometimes some people do not mistake buffoonery, for comedy. Because buffoonery or sometimes some people just act stupid, they don't even know they are being stupid, is making people laugh. So you don't call that comedy. That's personally, I get offended sometimes when I watch in in the political space, and then somebody's doing something, and then maybe somebody is trying to this, and then say, "Oh, all they are doing is comedy." Those are just comedy to me. I'm like, that's an insult to my creative space
Mm.
because it's an art form. Somebody has to sit down to create. There's a science to it, there's an art to it. And now in our modern world of technology, I can say that there's a technology, applied to it to put it together so that people can laugh. Now, for people to think, for people to maybe a call to action or something, that's another level of the discussion. But what is primary rather, is that it's something that makes people laugh. It's just like saying conscious music. You have to have a nice melody, you have to have a great voice, you have to have a wonderful production, and then nicely put lyrics before we can now say, oh, this is conscious music. The music is getting us to think, the music getting us to act. It has to, first of all, sound nice in the first place. So for comedy, yeah, there's a lot of work, a lot of process that goes into creating whatever piece of work, a joke, a script, whatever, a skit, a drawing, satiric piece, whatever. There's a lot that goes into it to get laughter. Whatever you want to get after that, that's another level of artistry being put in it.
Is comedy universal? So what would be funny in some context or in some
Mhm.
situation must it, or is it necessarily expected to be funny in another situation, circumstance, or space, or geography for that matter?
Yeah, yeah, I think comedy is universal. The only difference or the element that differentiates one from the other would be first communication. So whatever you are saying, the audience has to understand. There has to be some level of comprehension, from whatever you're communicating, and the subject has to, so I think I would say comedy is universal, but the subject has to be a lot more universal. So, for example, a mug is a mug anywhere. So, if you have a funny story about a mug and you're talking to a people who understand the mug, who understand the use of a mug, so maybe somebody can say, "Oh, they fed him, they fed the child baby formula in a mug." Right? Let's assume that's a funny story. It will be funny to those who understand that the mug is not meant for that, right? So if you go and talk to an audience that cop is cop now, you've lost it. So comedy, the idea of comedy is universal, but the communication, the cultural adaptability, the level of exposure of that audience, will determine, the spread of that. For example, you can crack a joke anywhere in the world about, let's say, activities in the nightclub, because a nightclub is a nightclub, loud music, drinks, dancing, what have you. Um, there are certain things you can crack jokes universally. Okay, you can crack joke universally about maybe a parent to child relationship, whooping the children and their reactions and all of that is something everybody can relate to. But you now go into more local material, some things that are very peculiar to a particular environment. Only people in that environment can relate, with that. I do certain impressions sometimes with some key political figures in Nigeria. And it's only those who have been exposed to those political figures that can relate with what I'm, putting out there. If I go somewhere else, they don't know those people. That's when you just look stupid, like, "Oh, okay, we're still waiting for the joke." So comedy, the idea of comedy is universal, but the communication, the conveyance, the comprehension, and the cultural adaptability, I think, is the different element.
I'm curious as to your journey into
Mhm.
comedy.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
So, I would say I was pretty much exposed to entertainment at a very young age. Um, I would say I was also exposed to other things, but I guess maybe the genes in me, the entertainment genes in me, gravitated towards the entertainment aspect, particularly comedy. So growing up, I used to watch all them Jaguar, Papi Lewis, Zebrodaya, Green Glory, Claros, locally. And then we used to have the likes of Bill Cosby, Mark Curry, hanging out with Mr. Cooper, that is. What they call him again? Is it Living Colors?
Hmm.
Yeah, Living Colors. Even Fresh Prince of Bel Air at some point. All those things that we had on our television at the time. Yeah, so all of this stuff I was watching on TV at the time, and I think I just found myself loving it, mimicking it, talking like them, acting like them, and then came the world of stand-up comedy in Nigeria. So back then on NTA, we used to have the likes of Oke Bakassi, Ali Baba, Mohammed Danjuma of blessed memory, Alan Blow, and the rest of them. I think Pastor Tari at some point too. Um, and then I think I was heavily influenced by Julius Ago when he came up with his music comedy album. I found myself singing exactly like him, talking exactly like him, sounding exactly like him. And I think to me at the time I was just playing with it. I was just having a great time. I remember in secondary school, I was in secondary school at the time. So we used to do the social club shows every Friday, and then we started charging gate fees, 5 naira, 10 naira regular, 20 naira VIP. In
I
the
wonder what
club.
VIP look like
No,
that.
in the front seat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we just sit in the first two rows in the classroom, the rest of you at the back, and we were sharing money at the time. We having fun, and then I think just finishing secondary school, it just hit me that okay, I think I want to study engineering, but I still want to be an entertainer. And then it gravitated. The conviction just kept coming strong, 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 strong. And 2002, that was when I made the decision that no, I'm going to be a stand-up comedian. And the beautiful part is the industry was not as glamorous as it is now. So for you to have made that decision as a young, how old was I? 15, 16, 17 year old thereabout. Yeah, so getting towards 16, 17. Yeah. It was like, are you spoiling your future before even your future is starting? Like, are you spoiling your future before your future is even going to start? But I was very strong about it. And one thing led to the other. I had few opportunities, milestones, deciding moments, and here we are, and we're still moving.
Ah, 16, 17. You were
Yeah,
not much older than Dave Chappelle when he started also.
yeah, yeah.
Ah,
And it wasn't that glamorous,
no, no.
It wasn't that glamorous, but we pulled through. I think I just believe so much in it. I can't even explain it myself. I can't even explain, like, sometimes I think about it. I'm like, what if I was wrong? What if I was just entering bush? you know, I was sometimes I
Or
think about it, I'm like,
or express
oh,
like masquerade,
express. I'm telling
like
you,
Egungun.
before the express I enter, Egungu, trailer jam Egungu, But I think that's the beauty of starting out young in anything you want to do. You probably will have room to make mistakes and maybe reroute, redirect, and still have room you know, to find yourself at the end of the day. Because, oh, by the way, I didn't even mention it wasn't even comedy as a whole. So when we used to charge 20 naira and 10 naira in secondary school, I used to do everything. I used to dance, I used to rap, I used to sing, I used to do fella, and then crack jokes, and then everything, act drama, everything. So it was actually entertainment for me. So I started out at some point. I thought I was going to be a singer. I used to sing all kinds of nonsense at the time. I call it nonsense, but they were hits at the time. I used to record
Back to
cassette,
back to back.
back to back. I used to record cassette, press play and record together, sing all kinds of things. Be gathering money that we want to go to studio. I actually went to studio. you know, I say, wait till be this. I wanted to be a DJ. I learned DJing. And then I think I was a dancer for a while. Yeah, I was a dancer, John Spirit of David in 2001. So between 2001 2002, I was dancing. But as a matter of fact, I thought the cracking of jokes was just on the side. And then I explored it. And I think that one was now opening more ways, you get. And yeah, so first of all, I had sold myself to the entertainment space. So I didn't even know what the entertainment space held at the time. If I said there was, apart from Jimmy Jat at the time, there was no DJ that was big that would be your role model, so to speak. Dancing, apart from maybe Kafi at the time, comedy, okay, there were quite a few, Alibaba, okay, Bakasi, TA, and the rest of them. So there were not too many role models. And the role models at the time were not as wealthy, as they are that you say, oh, there's something to look out for. Back then, musicians, comedians, actors, and all of that, they were buying Honda Accord, they were buying Benz 190, and newspaper will carry it. So it was a big deal for an entertainer to own a car at that time. If not, I used to even see some musicians then. I don't want to mention names who were in Port Harcourt, who were trekking through our street gloriously and glamorously. You understand? So it was just about the love for the art.
When you struck out, especially when you decided, okay, comedy it is. That's what's making way, as you said a while ago. What were the biggest challenges you encountered?
So the challenge, the biggest challenge at that time was number one, the entry barrier. It was very slim. It's not like now that you just put up your phone and if you have something really good, everybody will just enjoy it. And you might even have Snoop Dogg posting it, and you're big. But that time you had to meet somebody, let somebody. So there was the part of first convincing people. So we started from people within my dance group, the Spirit of David at the time. Oh, I'm a comedian, I can crack joke, I'm a crack joke. And they're like, since when? And then you get an opportunity. You're like, okay, that's nice. Then I met a guy, Charles Granville of blessed memory, and I'm like, I know you organize concerts for churches. Give me a slot. I'll make you proud. And Charles Granville was like, are you sure? I know you more as a dancer. Okay, you know what? Let's work a deal. Come and train my dancers, and then I work some slots for you. And then we were doing that. It was like a batter, take his people to a dance routine, take them to some dance shows or to dance in some concerts, as in church concerts, and then I get like 5-10 minutes, to crack some jokes. I'm like, okay, that's cool, that's cool. But my deciding moment was November 16, 2003. By then I had been, apart from hearing all the jokes, because I used to go to Day of 1,000 Laughs every 1st January. I used to carry my notebook and pen, go for first show because I couldn't be out at night. So it's New Year Day. Children are just running up and down. So your parents are not really looking out. Like, unlike now that our eyes are fully on our children, your parents are not really looking out. So I go for the 2 p.m. Is it 12 noon or 2 p.m. afternoon show? Finishes before 5, 6. So before it's dark, I'm home. I go with my pen and paper. Francis Duru, all of them, Basol, Jibokoko. They're cracking jokes and I'm writing. Notebook inside full show, presidential hotel. I'm writing. And then that's what I'll crack the whole year. So when I say I saw myself gravitating towards something, I started creating my own jokes, my own ideas, my own original ideas, that kind of thing. I'm like, okay, I think there's something here. And then, I started out. So yeah, meeting people. So like I said, November 16, 2003, I met a man, Okechukwu Ochuks, and I said, oh, give me an opportunity. And he said, are you sure? And he gave me 10 minutes in his big comedy concert at the old cultural center. Dance concert, Pure Gold. And I did 10 minutes opener. But guess what? There was a little snag. One of the dancers, I think they had danced back to back, so fatigue. So they needed to cover that space. They said, oh, where's that comedy guy? Come again. And then, I did another maybe 15, 20 minutes thereabout. And then there was now another vacuum where the amplifier got blown. They had to take a bike from Cultural Center to Rumumasi to bring it back. So this time around, no mic, no sound, no nothing. This is me and a hall of over 1,000 people projecting. And I was just going. So with a couple of years of watching comedy CDs, comedy, and then it's not like now that it's everywhere. And then to go and buy comedy video cassette, it takes the love and passion as a young chap to go and be buying comedy video cassettes. I was just downloading everything. It was just wild. And that is where I didn't even have a phone at the time. So that's where people started meeting me like, oh, wow, who are you? What are you? And instead of them taking my number, I was one taking their number to ask them, when is your own event? I'll call you, And I think that's how it moved until I met Michael Ogolo. And then Michael Ogolo stepped up my exposure. And then from there, I met Julius Ago, and then, kept on, who directly influenced me and directly mentored me as well. And then from there, we kept on moving, and, we're here today. So the barrier of entry at that time was very slim. So you needed to prove yourself, not once, not twice, severally. You needed to be original at all times, because anytime they feel you're not original, they can just drop you. So you needed to be original, at all times. So yeah, the idea of acceptance, the idea of originality, and of course still staying original. And I think that training is what has kept some of us from that generation, still valid and true to the art in this generation.
Speaking of being original, you described that when you started as a young kid, you were studying and regurgitating the works of other established comedians, but at some point you started writing your own material, and I'm sure you still do that till now.
Mhm.
So, what's your process? How did you start writing your material? What inspires you to write original material? Because
Mm.
some funny kid out there might be able to do well replicating other person's materials,
Yeah.
but to be original, you have
Mm.
to produce your material. How did
Yeah.
you start doing that? What's your process like?
So I think my process is not unique. I think everybody experiences that. So the ideas just drop. You could just be sitting down I could be having a conversation with you, and there's something you just said. And because I've got the funny bone, I've got for example, you could be talking to a pastor or a preacher, and then there's something you just say about the microphone, and it inspires a sermon topic in his head. And then you go to church the next day and you're like, oh, the other day my friend held the microphone and this, and it came to my mind that in Hebrews chapter 9, and you're like, yo, I just had this conversation with you. How did we get to Hebrews from here? So it's the same thing. You could have a conversation with somebody and he just says something, oh, that, this, and this, and this, and you're like, that's something. So you quickly, take a note. Before this era of phones, I used to move around with a notebook all the time. So I could just be on the road. I could be in a bus. I know those bus quarrels. Somebody just tell somebody, see you with your eye like a cricket. The whole bus on like, that's something. I bring out this thing. Man, I way they like cricket. That kind of thing. So the ideas just drop. The ideas just drop. And I think that's the beauty of art and creativity. A filmmaker will see something happening. Maybe a man and his wife just quarrel, one kind of quarrel, and a full a 1 hour, 30-minute story will just pop up in his head. Same way a comedian will see something, the same thing. And that's the beauty of comedy, because they crack a joke about a thing, and the thing has been in your face all year. And you're like, oh my God, this is crazy. And then you start laughing. You get what I'm saying? So for me, my antennas are always open, always, sensitive. And things are happening in the political space, in the social space, in the entertainment world, in my family. I see my children do some things. I'm like, that's something, so my brain just picks signals, from everywhere. Then I look at them as raw as they are. Sometimes some of the ideas they come, then when you take a second look at it, like, nah, no need. This one will just stress me. You understand? You look at some, there are some that sometimes I've had a couple of jokes that it took me 3 years to get the punchline. Yeah, 3 years, 4 years. You write it down, keep on. There's something here I never feel touch on yet. Keep on. Sometimes it takes for you to talk to a colleague. Sometimes you perform a joke somewhere and then you have a colleague. Alibaba does that a lot. And like, that thing you said about so and so, if you add this, I'm like, oh my world, that's what I've been looking for since. So there are different ways to go about it.
I've often heard that, especially in your field, in
Mhm.
the comedy industry, it's important to have a unique voice. I
Mm.
remember recently I was watching, I came across an episode of Club Shay
Mm.
online, and I saw one of the Wayans
It's good you
brothers.
even it's funny you said Club Sheshe when I was having a drink.
I see why you did that.
Yeah.
And he had one of the Wayans brothers. I think it was Damon,
Yeah.
and he was talking about when Cat Williams had featured earlier, sometime last year, which was
Mm.
huge and all that.
Mm.
And then I was asking him a question about that. And then Damon said something about the unique voice, and he said there's certain comedians who, when you hear them, you just know. And he mentioned Cat Williams. Uh, he mentioned. I mentioned his name earlier.
Dave Chappelle.
Dave Chappelle,
Yeah,
Chris Rock.
yeah.
When you just hear them, you just know.
Mm.
So, how important is it to have a unique voice?
Mm.
Do you consider that you have a unique voice? How did you come about
Yeah,
it?
I would want to think I do. And that voice we're talking about, it has to do with your thought process as a comedian. So every comedian, just like every artisan, they are blessed with their own unique
Pardon me if
touch.
I may say. You
Yeah.
mentioned Julius Argo earlier on.
Yes.
He's one of the most unique voices we have in the
Exactly,
industry.
exactly. So if you stem from that, it comes from their thought process, their creation process. There are some jokes you will hear. You don't need to hear it from the person. Somebody tells you, and you're like, this sounds like a so person joke because everybody. So again, the thing that's why, for example, when it comes to writing, you see that maybe in movies or whatever, you don't get to employ one writer because whatever, no matter how creative you are, there is one particular express route that your car is driving on, right? And so, as a comedian, you can move safely like that because people have grown to love you and like your art for that, thought process or for that. So there are some people like someone like Aporo. Aporo is crazy. You just know say this one is crazy. We have given up on him, right? You have someone like Kenny Black, processes through music. You have someone like Julius. Julius is more with body language. So what another comedian will say, oh, and the man fell and his children were laughing at him. And it would be funny. If Julius Ago will be pretty like, now the man, you're fall like this. Now you should be like, so Julius is more of body language and interpretation. Basket Mouth has more of like a warrior complex. Okay, Bakassi is more of a witty rascal old man, saying nothing but saying a lot at the same time, So everybody has their unique voice. And if you are a keen follower, of comedy, you can, without that person being there, you can tell that, oh, this is this person's joke. And it comes from working your thought process, always filtering and processing your ideas. You find out that as like a milling machine, as you continue to do so, everything is following an entire process. I make bold to say I'm one of those people that it is very hard for other comedians to copy our jokes because it comes from a very deep thought process. And it's not every comedian within our space that can align to that. So, I've met a bunch of comedians saying that to copy your joke hard because even the English way you go speak inside the joke self, I never feel speak and finish, and then it has to do with some form of relatability you get. So, when I'm talking about certain phenomenon, I talk about certain things and I bring in elements of physics and chemistry inside. I do a song and say, oh, this song is talking about what's that thing now, moving from higher level concentration to lower level of concentration. So if you didn't study those things, you can't relate. And the beauty of comedy is that it has to come from inside of you. Comedy is not a reported speech. It's not a speech that you read. There is a way another person will say there's just something, I'll use the word spiritual about it. There's a way it comes from deep within you that people can connect. And then that's how they get your voice.
How does a comedian, especially a youngin who's still coming up the ranks, how should they handle a bad day at the office? Maybe, and
Yeah.
you're doing your thing
Yeah.
and people are looking at you like, when are you going to leave?
Yeah.
Or hecklers and things like
Yeah,
that.
a bad day in the office is a bad day in the office. You take the kicking, take a licking, and keep moving. But as long as you are sure that you are in the right space, doing the right thing. Because there are somehow you have several bombs, and you just know that they not call me for this thing. Make I go find another work do. And then sometimes it could be that you're at the wrong place, you're at the wrong audience. So there are some people I've seen within our space right now that function well as comedy writers. We're beginning to have a lot of young chaps like that. I know a kid that is under my mentorship, and he he doesn't do exactly well performing. However, he can make your joke more beautiful than how you compose it. And fortunately for him, he has now discovered that niche for himself. So you see comedians who want to do shows, they prepare their set, they call him, he sits down, and then they start to perform. And he's hearing and he's like, okay, that part, add this, add that, and like, wow, this is great. So he's beginning to become like will I call him a comedic finisher, So before you know, he can design a career path for himself. Most of us were gifted in forming the materials and performing the materials. Then maybe there are some people who are good in embellishing and beautifying, them. So a bad day in the office is a bad day in the office. Nobody has had it 100%. Even the best of the best of the best of the best. You know, I've had two major ones, myself, and sometimes it has to do with timing. For me, my two bad days at the office was a case of timing. I was slated for a university show. These Ignatius Ajuro here, when they were College of Education, and they were doing all those their Miss Beautiful Girl on campus, and they didn't bring us up until like 4 a.m., almost 5 a.m. And then Timaya, they were waiting for Timaya, and then by 5 a.m., in fact, when I got there, that was also me not reading the room. When I was introduced, they welcomed me. They were all hailing. Ooh. I'm like, my job here is to introduce Timaya. They were excited. And then I cracked first joke. Second joke, I should have left and introduced Timaya. I now wanted to keep going. So by the time I was going to the third, fourth, and like, guy, because at some point when you mess up with timing and don't read the room, it doesn't matter how funny you are again. So like, guy, what's happening? Now bottle. I see bottle like this. They come and like I said, okay, I get it. You want Timaya? Come get him. You understand? Another time too was a corporate event in Lagos. A very senior comedian saw me perform somewhere the previous day. He was impressed. He now wanted to graft me into an event that they had no plan for me. And then he thought he could sneak me in where they were trying to bring a Fuji musician, how they call him, Quinayo Balogun. So where the band would be doing sound check, he thought he could sneak me in. So there I was battling when they were doing gung sound check. It was becoming a lot of noise for this in the engineer turned off my mic. It was just messy, And again, that was me not also reading the room very well, because there was an approach he told me to use, and I decided to use a different approach. And he was pissed. Like, you should have used this approach. Just go straight for the kill. So sometimes you get to a room, you maybe because of time, the arena, whatever. You're like, okay, what do I do? What do I do? No need to build up here. Just penalty shootout, go straight. Bah! There are some places you need. And then sometimes you go to some places and you are not attentive to the sensibilities and sensitivities of the people. You understand, and you could go somewhere and you didn't ask better questions, not knowing that the man there is a widower. Go and ask, oh God, die your wife, where's your wife? So what with experience, you now learn that if you don't know certain things, don't even touch certain areas. Like, there's a very top guy in Nigeria. When I went to his house for a private party, they're like, look, this man has got daughters. He doesn't have a son. So don't even mention anything about children. The last guy that came here and now says, son, you don't want to use I see that guy ever for this life again. You understand? So with experience, I've known that there are certain, and then everybody is being so sensitive these days. So there are certain areas you just leave for now until you're very much comfortable, until you're very much grafted in the system. There's a way you work with some certain clients for a long time. You are like family to them, and you can just, poke them anyhow. If not, you can fly safe. Don't touch family. Don't touch religion. Don't touch gender. Just fly safe.
Speaking of timing,
Yeah.
we have to go on a break now. It is Canvas and Niger-Delta Roundtable. I have the pleasure of having here a comedy extraordinaire, Daniel Nnwoka. Program continues shortly. Please stay with us.
Our yellow and black markers indicate pipeline and flow line right-of-way boundaries. Your activity could impact on the buried high-pressure hydrocarbon pipelines and flow lines, leading to possible leaks and explosion. Please keep off. Do not engage in sand mining or any form of excavation, pipeline vandalism, oil theft, and bush burning within pipeline and flow line right-of-way. Do not farm, trade, or locate any business on pipeline and flow line right-of-way. It is against the law to apportion land, sell, or build on pipeline and flow line right-of-way. Maintain a setback distance of at least 30 meters or about 100 feet from the right-of-way boundaries always. We care for your safety and that of the environment.
This message is brought to you by the Shell Petroleum Development Company of Nigeria Limited, SPDC, operator of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company, NNPC Limited, Total Energies, and Ajib Joint Venture.
Okay, Max. Still Canvas, the Niger-Delta Roundtable brought to you by SPDC. I'm Dyer. With me for this episode is comedy genius, Daniel Nnwoka, aka Dan D Humorous. Dan, great to have you here again.
Thank you.
And we're discussing getting into the comedy industry. I imagine that there are several young persons out there who want to become the next Dan D Humorous, the next Alibaba, the next Basket Mouse, the next Bovi, the next, you name it, the next Dave Chappelle, and the next Chris Rock. I believe this conversation will help them.
Yeah.
If you were to give one advice, and I know there could be, a litany. You could write a whole book if you haven't written a book yet. But if you were to give one advice to some youngin who's watching or listening to this right now on becoming a comedian or making it in the comedy industry, what would it be?
The simple, straight, number one, and only advice for this conversation would be sure that you are true to yourself in this art. Be sure that you are truly cut out for this art. Be sure that you are not drawn to it because of the glitz, because of the glamour, because of the fame, the wealth, the money, the blah, blah, blah. Be very sure you're true to you because the back end is way tougher than what you see in front. And that's where the truth.
Besides the art itself, which is very important, I mean, you have to be good at your craft and you have to hone that craft. You have to improve the craft to stay relevant. But then again, there is a business side to it.
Yeah.
How does a comedian combine or manage, honing your craft, perfecting your craft, and the business side of things? How do you do that, for example?
Yeah, so that's where structure comes in. That's where being organized, comes in. And that's where you now understand that what we do is not essentially a one-man business. It's an entire value chain on its own because you're going to be doing your own shows, for example. You're going to be doing it under your company or a production company or an event management company or whatever. It's going to have some level of staffing. You're going to also involve other levels of expertise, technical and logistics, personal domestic services, and all of that. So there is the part for structuring. There is also the part for education. I've done a couple of executive courses in the business side of entertainment because where a lot of us miss it is we focus more on the entertainment and then forget the business side of it. And granted, at the beginning stage, you're very passionate, you just want to just show up and show out and show off. But it gets to some point, you now want to do the business of the show, So from having staff around you, your security, your logistics, your welfare, everything is an entire structure, so your level of organization is being employed at that stage. But it comes with growth. As you grow, you will realize by yourself. Nobody will tell you. Nobody will tell you.
Is comedy under threat? And let me give some context to that question.
Okay.
For example, you find Nigerian comedians like yourself come on stage, and then before you deliver a joke, You start by giving a warning. Najoko. And then we had the unfortunate incident at the Oscars. Was it the Oscars? Will Smith, Chris Rock receiving a slap nobody will forget in a very long time or ever. And then we had Dave Chappelle was attacked on stage as well. Not too long after the unfortunate Oscar incident. And I imagine even in Nigeria as well, we've had a couple of incidents as well. So, and you mentioned sensitivity earlier. People are sensitive these days. So, is comedy under threat?
It's not under threat. Just maybe a few people, a few very tiny, minute, few consumers of comedy are being triggered, by certain things. And, when you look at... what's it called now? The Chris Rock situation. It depends on the side of the argument you are on. I don't think that public show, would have been necessary. Of course, we know the context and the background of that very wonderful couple in the first place, and they're just coming out of, a situation, or what's that word now? An entanglement situation at the time, and then here comes. So again, to put some form of balance. Perhaps Chris Rock would have just left them entirely. You get what I'm saying? But, that's where the creative risk also comes in. Sometimes you just want to say something. I've had situations where I crack jokes about my own wife. I crack jokes about my own children. I lost my father, and so that's a beautiful thing. I lost my father. I was planning for burial. And in the process of planning for burial, things that are happening in that process are giving me joke ideas. Yeah. And then when burial was, I'm cracking jokes about them, and then some people have been like, your papa just died, but that's creativity, for you. But again, one has to be careful where you are dispensing it at the time. You just might offend somebody, and then somebody does not know how to process and contain and might, react. But comedy is under threat? Absolutely not.
So does it mean that there are topics or subject matters that are off the table as a comedian? So does it mean you can't fully express your creativity?
It depends on where you want to. So for me, I feel that there are no topics off the table. However, the platforms, you have to be selective. You can, for example, go to a gathering of divorcees and start to talk about divorce. You just be reminding people of their problem. All right. However, if you're fortunate to go to a gathering of happily married people all over the place, you can make jokes about divorcees. You get what I'm saying? So it's just about reading the room, understanding the environment, and knowing what's appropriate at the time.
Can comedy, when I asked you earlier when we started the recording this, and I think it was the first question, what is comedy? You talked about, you said several things, designed to make people laugh.
Yeah.
And I asked you, can I do something else afterwards? And you spoke about that as well.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to be a bit more specific now.
Yeah.
Can comedy be a tool for social change if it's primarily about making people laugh?
Yeah. Yes, it can. So and that's where satire, comes in. When we were doing the other news channels, TV, that was one of our, core objectives. For every line we were writing, we had the need to have what is called a call to action. I think a good example would be when we were doing Funky 4, in Port Harcourt here. We were just cracking jokes on radio, and then certain things were being brought to our attention, unattended roads, no lights in certain areas. And because we commanded the attention of the authorities at the time, we were able to be relaying all those things. And then, of course, we're relaying it in humor, right? So the authorities are enjoying the humor, but they are getting the information and they are acting. Because there are some things that in fact, there are a couple of times we talk on a particular subject, the commissioner will drive from where it is and run to our studio to come and clarify, so that's, some level of social change. So yes, especially where satire comes in, you can actually still give humor and still put out a call to action.
Networking. In almost every industry you hear it's key. You have to be able to network. And I think in your industry as well, just a while ago when you're talking about your beginnings, you mentioned, this comedian took me here, this person did this, that person did that. So how key is networking in comedy, and how do you build a network as an upcoming comedian?
Well, I'm here as a product of network. So yeah, networking is key. I mean, no man is an island. As you grow your fan base, as you work your art, you get lovers, of your work. Your fan base grows, and as your fan base grows, you get relationships along the line. You now know how to manage and navigate, those relationships, particularly in the corporate world, in the advertising world, in different areas that can support, your art. Because at that point, your art becomes a business. So there are certain things you cannot do at certain level if you don't have the likes of like this wonderful brand, alongside. And those things come from a level of relationship. But that relationship is born out of the love for your art. So there are two key factors. You grow your art, you build your fan base, you have a great relationship, and then you now know how to navigate and manage those relationships for the betterment of your work.
You mentioned fan base just now. So how do you build a fan base? How do you grow your audience? Because there are other comedians out there who are doing a great job, by the way.
Yeah. One thing that kept me going in my growing days, I'm still growing anyway. In my growing days was I heard it from Daddy Shoki. He said the sky is wide enough for every bird to fly, and the way the world is now, there is space. And how is the space created? There are certain things I would be doing. I could have been doing 10, 15 years ago. I've been doing this now 22, going to 23 years thereabout. There are certain things I could do 10, 15 years ago that I'm not doing anymore. I can't even do them. I don't want to do them comedy-wise. There is space there. So, don't ever, upcoming comedians should never think that the space is clogged. We live in a world where the space is even more. Back then, we need to meet somebody to meet somebody. These people that I'm telling you that I met, LD, Michael, Gold, all of them, it's not like I didn't just meet them the first day and say, hi, my name is this, I'm a comedian. Yeah. Some of them took me 3, 4, 5 meetings. I used to go to their stations to disturb them. You understand what I'm saying? But now, you don't even need to, this thing, you don't need to really disturb anybody. Put out a nice video. If it's really funny, it's out there. But so your fan base is different from your relationships, right? Your relationships will grow your business. Your fan base will grow your following, but they are all stemming from your art. So it comes back to you staying true and original to your art.
Talking about staying true to your original, how do you stay motivated? How do you stay resilient in the face of tough times? And inevitably they will come. So you had that passion, you had that fire. I think I'm a funny person. I think I got a funny bone. You're doing well. But when you hit that rock, how do you stay motivated?
Oh yeah, you get to hit that rock from time to time. I can assure you. You get to. I've been there a couple of times, and I know it's not going to end. But what I've been able to devise from that is, at every point, every time you get to that point, it's only that's how do I put it now? That's part of you crying out for another dimension, crying out for a diversification. If you have been following a certain path and it's been going, the point, immediately you hit a certain point, like this is where I am. Nothing is moving. Instead of you to fight it, that no, it must move, it's just a sign that there's another way to go, right? Look left or look right. So I'll give you an example. I've been doing stand-up comedy for, a long time, going for shows, MC, blah, blah, blah. And then towards the turn of COVID-19 and all of that, in fact, prior to that, by 2018, I felt like I'd done, when it comes to stand-up comedy, waiting remain again. What is that? And then someone asked me, what's your plan for next year, 2019? And I told the person, nothing. I just want to enjoy 2019. I don't know what the plan is. And then 2020 came, and then there was that sudden realization, like, it means that if you know come out, you know go see money. And then I started rethinking, and then like, okay, this is the way to follow. And now I'm in the space where I'm talking about making films, and the space where I'm talking about producing my own TV shows, elevating, and that's where they are elevating my stand-up comedy shows to a certain, level. Even prior to that, my living Port Harcourt was another phase, of that nature. So the point is, at every point that you feel that you are dry, no, you are not dry. That's just your body. When I mean your body now, your artistic body calling for another level, of growth.
Let me rephrase that question. How do you stay funny in the face of
staying funny?
adversity? No, you answered the earlier question perfectly.
Okay.
I just thought of a different angle to it.
Okay.
Now. So how do you stay funny, especially when you're passing through adversity, like you're suffering a loss, for example? Something catastrophic has happened in your own life that is not funny at all.
Yeah.
How do you stay funny?
So again, that's where it comes to the truthfulness of the art. I can tell you that I've had a miscarriage situation and a joke came out of it. But now here's the thing. You're not going to crack that joke. You just store it somewhere, in your head. And that's why I say and then you have to be sensitive that, okay, I'm going through a lot, but I don't want to hear anything. No, you just have to be sensitive enough to, pick it, and keep it there. It's just, there's no way to explain it in full, complete English, than to say, maybe let me use the political, if he didn't day, he didn't day, right? So he just has to day. And as long as he day, as long as he's there, you can always process it. You're a human being, after all. You will go through stuff. But don't forget that you're also a creative as well. So you need to find a way to carry them side by side.
What changes do you see happening in the comedy industry? And how do you think comedians can stay relevant? Is it the same as it was 10, 20 years ago? Is it evolving? Are there changes? How does one stay in tune?
Yeah, so definitely it's not the same. What is the same and not the same. It's the same in the terms, in the art is still the same. You just have to make people laugh. You just have to create nice stories, nice jokes, whatever. The methods definitely have changed. Technology has brought some level of evolution. With another new branch of another new industry has come forth. The skit makers and the likes of them. But the core remains being funny, not just stupidly funny. Because one of the things people enjoy with comedy, in as much you can make them laugh, but they're like, yeah, that's stupid though. But then one of the beauty, like you're watching a skit, is funny, but you're appreciating the work being put into it. You're appreciating the dexterity being applied here. So to put that in the ballpark answer again, you have to also be sensitive to the times. You have to be flexible to the times. You don't have to say, no, as it was in the beginning, so shall it be. No, then go leave you for road loss. You understand? So as things are moving with technology and all of that, you adapt. The styles are changing, you adapt. But what remains core is the art form. You just need to change it, whatever, to blend to how things are, in the society. And then sometimes too, you also need to stand against the norm. Because sometimes the norms might be derailing. So that's where certain people like us comes in to say, no, this is how the true form is. There was a time people who started abusing our stand-up comedy shows, started making it look like some form of social gathering, You see people, they started bringing the use of tables. In fact, one change I can tell you that has happened that almost threatened the comedy industry. People were doing comedy shows and started bringing in musicians, small to spice up. All of a sudden, at some point, it now became as if musicians have taken over comedy shows. You're doing a comedy show and somebody's asking you who they perform in terms of music, which musician they bring. You're now doing a comedy show, you're under pressure to bring this musician because this is. But good thing, if there's one thing that we have achieved, some of the comedians, especially from a business angle, it was not making sense financially again. You get, by the time you sell tickets, tables, blah, 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 and then look at what you're paying this guy, comedians have now started promoting only comedians. In fact, promoting only themselves. You see situations now where a comedian is on his bill, only his face is there. And he's getting a good room. You see where he putting a poster and only comedian. He's not promoting this musician over the comedian. So those are things that sometimes you're following a norm, then the norm wants to derail. You come back and put things in order.
Talking about staying true to the art, I mean, if there's one, I know that there are a number of comedians in the industry in Nigeria who have stayed true to the art, but I make bold to say that I know for certain one person as well who came out from the Niger-Delta River State here. And I'm talking about you. I remember, I think I've mentioned this to you before. I remember years ago, your one-man show at the Aztec Archon. For me, it's still one of the best comedy shows that I've ever had the pleasure of attending personally.
Yep.
It was wonderful. You were mind-blowing. For about an hour, it was...
An hour, 40 minutes.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
It was just you, no other comedian, and you were funny back-to-back. From beginning to the very end, there was no dull moment. What are your future goals? What's the career path? What does the future hold for Dan D Humorous?
Well, still Dan D Humorous is still Dan D Humorous, still doing stand-up comedy. Like you mentioned, the one-man show. That's one art form you mentioned because that's how stand-up comedy shows ought to be. It's not supposed to be a convention. And there's some of us who stay true to it. All my shows, you don't get to see more than at most 5 comedians if I'm featuring others. And then right now, I'm looking towards bringing in, let me just say, the international and the local together, because I feel like I've done the very best of the local. We've set a standard. You mentioned 100 and an hour, 40 minutes. That set a standard, particularly in Port Harcourt. A couple of young folks have come after me. They've even beaten that record, and I'm happy about that. So which is why I tell you when I answered the previous question about what's the next direction. So at this point, I'm at the level where for stand-up comedy, I'm bringing the local and the international together. I'm just gonna just leave it there for now until more things evolve. So we're stepping it up to bring. And then one of my core visions right now in the area of stand-up comedy is I believe we can put stand-up comedy in the place where we have Afrobeat right now. And I have a number of other comedians that think alike like me. And we're starting that with the kind of shows we want to be doing this year, going forward. And because we believe that if people, they don't know last, you don't cast, but they are dancing, I believe if we push our comedy to a certain level, we will also be on those platforms or comedy platforms of same, manner or likelihood. So right now, for me, I'm thinking out of the shores of this country. I'm not Japan. I'm just exporting the gift. And then, of course, we're doing television, we're doing film, and other parts of our giftings that we have that comedy has opened the door for, put our foot in the door for. We're exploring in that area. So, that's it right now.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Canvas and Niger-Delta Roundtable, brought to you by SPDC. We've discussed getting into the comedy industry. And if you're a young Niger-Deltan who are thinking, I'd like to be the next Dan D Humorous, well, guess what? You've had the fortune of listening or watching Dan D Humorous himself tell his story and inspire you as to how you can be one of the next greats as well. Daniel Nnwoka has been my guest, comedy great. Dan D Humorous. Daniel, thank you so much for your time.
Appreciate, big time.
I'm Adedayo Lushakin, and catch us for another episode on the usual platforms. Thanks for joining. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And now, performing a short stand-up is my guest, comedian extraordinaire, Daniel Nnwoka, a.k.a. Dan D Humorous.
How you doing, ladies and gentlemen? Dan D Humorous right here again, right? So, I always say that I belong to a very special generation, the millennials, right? And we see the Gen Z around us, and the Gen Z have given birth, we give birth to Gen Alpha. And this 2025 and beyond, we hear that Gen Beta is coming. So, Gen Z, you think you can do, don't worry, this Gen Beta, waiting on to do us. They will do you people. And as their generation sounds, it will be bitter for you. Because I don't understand, you Gen Z people, do you know the things we went through as millennials, you people just smarting, oh, mental health, oh, my mental health, my mental health. Small query they give you in the office, oh, toxic work environment. Small quarrel you quarrel with your boyfriend, oh my God, you're gaslighting me. It's not only gaslighting, it's gas cylinder. You people are just very decent. Even, okay, even where you're working, Gen Z want to write resignation letter. They can't even compose themselves and write simple resignation letter. You just write, dear GM, I'm out. What is that? Dear GM, I'm out. You Gen Z people, I don't know. But what you people don't understand is that this Nigeria, especially, it has not changed. It is still how it is. Anywhere where you meet them, now there your generation start from. Like I see some of you shouting, oh, fuel is 1,004, dollar, fuel is 900 naira, be 800 naira, dollar is 1,004. Do you know when we met dollar? Do you know the people? Go and ask our parents. There has never been any time they say Nigeria, they groove. Nigeria don't they come since. Let me tell you, Gen Z, you will not know. We were in this country, they increased fuel to 20 naira. There was protest. Yes, there was protest. Where is the fuel today now? Don't worry. What you should be afraid of? You see Gen Alpha, Gen Beta. Not them. You see this today. Fuel is 900, 800. Don't worry. Gen Alpha, Gen Beta. In your time, fuel 16,008. You will be the one shouting that, there was a time it was 900 naira now. The first time I knew anything called dollar to naira, it was 35 naira in my time as a young child. Where are we today now? 1,000 something. Don't worry. Gen Alpha, Gen Beta, calm down. In your time, especially Gen Beta, $1, 66.9. Bet me. You don't even know school fees. Let me even tell you now, my generation, 1991-92, Aladumo School, Port Harcourt. I'm calling their name. Go and ask them. 1992, my school fees was 4,000. My papa shout, why is school fees 4,000? That in his time, it was 33 naira. My grandmother was alive, she's still alive anyway. Say in her time, it was 16 shillings. My great-grandmother was alive at the time. He said in her time, it was free school. Mary Slessor sponsors it. So this thing don't increase now. Now we are paying 1.2, 1.2. No problem. Gen Beta, Gen Alpha, are you there in your time as parents? Ordinary summer vacation class, 88.2 million. You'll be the one crying. But don't worry, anyway, meet the generation, Nadia is start for you.